So this is the part of the video where I'm supposed to write a hook to keep you all watching, but I think there's enough hooks in HELLRAISER already. Good evening, everyone. My name is Celeste Lecobre. Welcome back to the channel. So a couple disclaimers before we get into the meat of the analysis. First, I'm going to spoil the shit out of this. So if you've not seen HELLRAISER, do me and yourself a favor. Go ahead and add this video to your watch later playlist. Go watch HELLRAISER and then come back and join me for the video. Next, we're only going to be discussing the first film as its own thing in a vacuum, essentially. The first film is really complex enough without trying to incorporate the rest in a way that isn't completely messy. The sequels really mess with the lore and the themes to various degrees, and trying to make a coherent thematic narrative of them all is basically impossible, and also, in my opinion, not a useful lens to interpret the original film. My final disclaimer is that this is my analysis. This is a very esoteric film open to many readings, and what I'm about to present is just one of many potential ways that you can read the film. Please tell me in the comments how you interpret the film and where we agree and disagree. So let's go ahead and run through a quick plot recap. So Larry and Julia are in a loveless marriage and have just moved into a new house. Unbeknownst to them, Frank, Larry's brother and Julia's former lover, is living in the basement. He has essentially sold his soul to demons that are summoned through a puzzle box and is attempting to come back to life. He finally achieves this through blood that Julia feeds him, and the demons return. I think it's important to discuss Clive Barker's background, as there are things about him that I think inform our understanding of the film. He's an openly gay man and an unapologetic horror lover. These things, in my opinion, explicitly inform his art. He also wrote the source novel, as well as took it upon himself to make this film his directorial debut, as he was unsatisfied with previous adaptations of his literary works. So, to me, the power of sexuality is the primary theme that HELLRAISER explores. First, there's the power of desire. Julia's relationship to Frank is purely driven by lust and desire. It is so strong that she is willing to do anything for him because he breaks up the monotony of a loveless and sexless marriage. His domination awakens sexual feelings in her that she just can't get anywhere else, and she's willing to kill for them. Next, there's the power of seduction. Julia uses this to lure men to their own death, and it is incredibly easy for her to do so. And finally, there's the power of the taboo. The puzzle box promises pain and pleasure beyond what is possible on Earth. Despite the inherent dangers, Frank is willing to risk his entire life and his entire afterlife to achieve these ends. Next, let's talk about the various subtexts that I believe are present in the film. First, let's talk about kink. In the universe of HELLRAISER, pain and pleasure are intertwined and indistinguishable. Somehow, the film manages to be completely repulsive and yet endlessly seductive in equal measures. Throughout the film, there's lots of pulsing, moaning, sucking, squelching, wetness, whipping, etc. And all of these things manage to elicit feelings of eroticism and feelings of disgust. The use of hooks in the film is important to me as well. They are literal in how they hook and bind our characters, but they also serve as visual metaphors for how the seduction of the Cenobites hook the characters. There's also frequent use of flower blossoming imagery throughout the film. To me, this signifies budding sexuality, sexual awakening, and sexual realization, which is a good tie-in to my next point. This next part might be a little bit controversial and perhaps more subjective than the rest of my analysis, but it's definitely something that I gleaned from the text of the film. Let's talk about homosexuality as subtext in HELLRAISER. So the AIDS virus was becoming a prominent concern in the wider culture in the 1980s. It was also thought of as a gay disease and contributed to significant marginalization of an already severely marginalized community. And while it was true that AIDS primarily affected the gay community, it certainly didn't only affect the gay community, and it wasn't like a guaranteed thing to get if you were a practicing gay man. In the 1980s, AIDS was a very real and ever-present horror for the entire gay community. The puzzle box in the film, to me, represents queerness and embracing your sexuality, whereas the Cenobites represent the very real dangers that accompany that. How accurate is this? Were queer people as likely to contract HIV as Frank was to be torn apart by Cenobites? Not at all. However, in the thick of it, and in the midst of watching your community die and your governments do nothing, I suspect it probably felt a lot like it. To me, the puzzle box represents all of the forbidden pleasures and freedoms that queer people were willing to risk their lives for after a life spent languishing in the closet and living in cis-heteronormative society. So, in creating these horrific creatures that grant sexual desire and aberration, Barker is showing homophobic straight people what they want to see. Monsters that corrupt good, decent people. However, he shows them not just as monsters, but articulate, powerful beings grounded in real human attributes. The appeal and the seduction is undeniable, and the morality of them is purposefully obscured in gray. Finally, let's talk about the critique of Christianity in the film. Throughout, there is constant imagery relating to and subverting traditional Christian and Catholic imagery. In the universe of Hellraiser, there are very in-depth and fleshed out ideas about what hell means, but to my memory, there's not a single mention of heaven anywhere in the text of the film. Barker is only concerned with crafting his own hell, equally filled with searing, ripping pain and blasphemous carnal delights. So towards the end of the film, Frank has hooks all over his face and is about to be torn to pieces by the Cenobites, and he looks at Kirsty, who is looking at him in horror, and simply says, "Jesus wept." I wanted to talk about this line because it's very significant, it's very chilling, and I think it is loaded with thematic depth. So I've always been familiar with Jesus wept as a Bible verse, but when I looked into it some more, there are actually some other meanings that I was previously unaware of. So according to the Wikipedia article on the phrase, this is both the shortest verse in the Bible, which I previously knew, and a British expletive, which I didn't know. So let's talk about these various meanings. So the verse itself refers to the sorrow experienced by Jesus before he ultimately resurrects Lazarus. This parallels the resurrections of Frank and the Cenobites in the film. It is also an expletive used to express exasperation at an annoyance or inconvenience, and also a sarcastic phrase used to mock someone else's self-pity. Here, Frank kind of uses all of these meanings at once. He mocks Kirsty and laments his own state simultaneously, because she has suffered throughout the film, but he is about to be torn to pieces. Finally, this phrase also seems to mock the pain of Christ himself, or at least comment on how horrified Jesus must be to witness all that has transpired throughout the film. So to give this a final rating, I think this is like my 4th time watching the film, and as of now, I'd put this at a solid, strong 9 out of 10. However, I don't know, the more I think about it, upon a reviewing, it could definitely end up as one of my perfect 10s. It's a film that I love more and more and find more richness in it with every subsequent viewing. So please stick around and subscribe to the channel, because later this week we'll be doing another analysis just like this one for the new 2022 version that was just put out by Hulu. I pride myself on fostering a kind, thoughtful, and inclusive community here on YouTube, so comments that are in line with those values are greatly appreciated. Please like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more like it. That would help me out in the algorithm and would help me make more videos like this one. There's links in the description to my Letterboxd, Rate Your Music, and Instagram accounts, should you like to be a little bit more intimate with me. In about 5 seconds, there's going to be a screen pop up in front of you where you can click on the subscribe button and you can click on my playlist of all my other reviews. So let's hang out in the next video. Until then, hail Clive Barker. Hail Doug Bradley. We have such sights to show you. And hail Satan. Bye.